course, those lands are greater than just what's known as the Rio Grande Valley. Uh, the what is Somisec is great, a large part of Texas and Tamaulipas, Nuevo León, Coahuila, and a little bit of Chihuahua on the other side of the river. What's known now as the Rio Grande, uh, but that's the sacred spirit river for our ancestors and our people. And so the Eshtok in these regions are the original people of the land. And down here, where Brownsville is located, if you're not too familiar with Texas geography, Brownsville is right on the river, and across the river is our sister city, Matamoros, Mexico. And then not too far to the east of Matamoros and Brownsville, is the Gulf of Mexico. And where the river gets to the Gulf of Mexico is known as Boca Chica, the little mouth, or the little mouth of the river, right? And so, this, Brownsville itself is a settler town, but it's on top of multiple villages of multiple ancestral villages of Eshtok. And as you go towards the coast and closer towards the river, of course, that's where there are many ancient village sites and where people lived. Ancestral Eshtok lived, were born, and were buried when they passed on. And of course, placenta after birth, the placenta and umbilical cords are buried in the ground. It's an old indigenous tribal custom, and that literally roots people into the ground. That is part of how Native people are one with their homelands. And so that's just a really brief background, and later, of course, Chairman Mancias can give you a much better overview of the history and the sanctity of the land. But what we wanted to do is make more people aware of some of the issues that are happening now. And of course, native land, and in this case, near the coast, so getting over towards the port of Brownsville, there are two large proposed methane fracked gas export terminals. One of them is known as the Rio Grande LNG project, and the other one is Texas LNG. And so if you guys don't know what fracked gas is, it's when gas companies are using the methods of hydraulic fracturing, they're like breaking up the rock, and they're poisoning and polluting fresh water in order to extract more oil, more gas. And then they want to ship that gas out to the global market. Well, a lot of that gas is getting mined out of the Permian Basin of Texas and New Mexico and the Eagle Ford Shale in Central Texas. And these companies have built pipelines, and they want to build more gas export terminals to get all of that gas out into the global gas market, the global fossil fuel market. And of course, these are private companies, so they're not going to share any of the profits, but they're willing to poison and destroy the environment, destroy the land, and endanger communities like ours down here in Brownsville, which is predominantly BIPOC, Mexican American identifying. 95% of the population is, they're communities of color. And also these counties down here, because of, generations of economic abandonment and systematic exploitation of land and labor, there's a lot of poverty, unfortunately. There are a lot of people that are struggling day to day. And we're considered a healthcare desert down here. So there's a lot of issues. And because we're right on the settler colonial border, there's been, especially since 9/11, there's been a ramp up in direct border militarization, the rapid expansion of law enforcement. And, that's made life difficult for a lot of normal human beings. But But anyway, but back to the LNG facilities. They're not built yet, and of course, there have been people down here trying to stop those from happening, including the tribe, because those projects are destroying sacred land of the tribe, and sacred sites, ancestral sites. One in particular is known as Garcia Pasture, and that would be obliterated by the Texas LNG site. And the World Monument Fund named, through the work of Juan Mancias and Krista Mancias Zapata, they made sure that the World Monument Fund knew, and then they chose to recognize Garcia Pasture as an important cultural site that's most threatened or most endangered on their list back in 2021, I believe it was. 2022, I'm sorry. In the spring of 2022, Garcia Pasture was listed as one of the 25 most endangered, most important cultural sites. And the ironic thing is, if tribal members were to try to go onto the site, to visit the site, because law enforcement considers it to be the land of the Port of Brownsville, Port Authority land, we might get arrested for trespassing, even though it's not only one of our sacred sites, but it's even recognized as a sacred site on the National Register of Historic Places. So we're literally trying to save sacred sites from being destroyed by fossil fuel colonization, ongoing colonization in the form of fossil fuel businesses, oil and gas. And this area of the coast down here off Brownsville, Texas, we haven't been colonized yet by extreme petrochemical interests or extreme industrial interests. And so the coastline is enjoyable. It's cleaner than most of the Texas coast that's already been sacrificed to oil and gas. The seafood is edible because the waters are still clean enough for that. And we have a strong fishing industry. There's ecotourism possibilities here. This is one of the areas that people from all over the world come to bird watch. It's a great birding area. And there's a lot of biodiversity and unique ecological areas, especially between the river and the coast. And so there's so many beautiful things here that can lead to, well-being for the people here. But, the interests of a few very rich, very short-sighted people in the oil and gas industry just want to sacrifice this area too to the oil and gas industry, instead of, allowing the area to retain its natural beauty and its ecosystems. The Port of Brownsville, the Brownsville Ship Channel, and the Port of Brownsville around it are literally in between two national wildlife refuges, the Laguna Arascosa Wildlife Refuge and the Lower Rio Grande Wildlife Refuge. And so it just doesn't make a lot of sense to put these very polluting and destructive industries in between two wildlife refuges. The other thing about these gas facilities is that they would have associated gas pipelines in order to pipe the fracked methane down into these. And remember, these are only for export. Not a drop of that gas is going to be for domestic consumption. So yeah, these companies would have to also, in this case, Enbridge would want to build the Rio Bravo pipeline to bring all this gas down here. And Enbridge, of all pipeline companies, has some of the worst safety records, and it has a track record of committing extreme violence towards Native people as they stand up and resist these polluting industries. Another problem is the colonization of private space industry, private space tourism. So Elon Musk has been pushing his sort of pet toy project, SpaceX, here, and he's kind of ruined and destroyed coastal wetlands and really delicate habitat areas for endangered species. And he's built his SpaceX project like right on the beach. The public